Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, her weathered hands gripping the rail as she watched the massive holographic display show what no human had ever seen before. Thousands of obsidian-black ships hung in space like deadly jewels against the star field, their hulls seeming to absorb light itself. The alien fleet stretched across dozens of light minutes, a formation so vast it defied comprehension. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies," Communications Officer Martinez reported, his voice tight, with barely controlled fear. "It's being broadcast across the entire Sol system." Sarah nodded grimly. "Put it through." The bridge fell silent as an alien voice filled the air, speaking perfect English with an accent that sounded like grinding metal. "Humans of the third planet, you are primitive. You are weak. You have expanded beyond your world without permission from the hegemony of eternal night. This transgression ends now." The voice paused, and Sarah could hear her crews breathing in the silence. Around them, the smaller human ships of the Solar Defense Fleet looked pathetically insignificant compared to the alien armada. "Surrender your worlds. Surrender your fleets. Surrender your people to become servants of the hegemony. You have 72 of your planetary rotations to comply. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why 600 species have learned to kneel before the Black Armada." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah's jaw tightened as she processed what she'd just heard. 600 species conquered. 600 civilizations that had faced this same ultimatum and apparently failed to resist. "Admiral," her tactical officer, Commander Roberts, spoke up hesitantly. "Our long-range sensors are detecting similar fleets at every major human colony. Alpha Centauri, Wolf 359, Gliese 667, they're everywhere." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The coordination required for such a simultaneous appearance across dozens of star systems suggested a level of technology and organization that humanity had never encountered. The aliens had clearly been watching them, studying them, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," Sarah ordered. "And patch in all fleet commanders system-wide. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Within minutes, her screen filled with the faces of military leaders from across human space. Admiral Reyes from the Mars Defense Grid, General Patterson from the Titan base, Captain Morrison from the asteroid mining stations. All of them wore the same expression of grim determination mixed with underlying terror. President Catherine Walsh appeared on the main channel from Geneva, her usual composed demeanor cracked but holding. "Admiral Chun, I assume you've received the same message we all have. What's your assessment?" Sarah glanced at her tactical display again. The alien ships remained motionless, but their very presence was a psychological weapon. "Madam President, we're looking at a force that outnumbers our entire fleet by at least 50 to 1. Their ships are massive, easily dwarfing our largest dreadnoughts. But what concerns me most is the intelligence they've demonstrated. They know our language, our population centers, our military deployments. They've been watching us for a long time." Admiral Reyes leaned forward on his screen. "I've run preliminary scans on the ships in Mars orbit. Their hull material doesn't match anything in our databases. It's not absorbing our sensor beams, it's somehow negating them. We're essentially blind to their internal structure." "There's something else," Commander Roberts added, his voice heavy with implications. "The positioning of their fleets, it's not random. They've placed themselves to cut off every major trade route, every supply line between our colonies. If we tried to consolidate our forces, they could prevent it." President Walsh's face hardened. "So they're not just making threats. They're already implementing a siege strategy." The weight of their situation settled over the conference like a shroud. Humanity had always known this day might come, that their expansion into the galaxy might eventually bring them into contact with hostile aliens. They'd built fleets, established defensive positions, created contingency plans. But no one had imagined facing an enemy so vast, so technologically advanced, so utterly prepared. "What about the Kepler expedition?" General Patterson asked. "Weren't they supposed to return this month with their deep space reconnaissance data?" Sarah shook her head. "The Kepler hasn't been heard from in 6 months. We assumed they were still in radio silence, maintaining their stealth protocols." Now, she didn't need to finish the sentence. The fate of the Kepler expedition was now obvious. The humans weren't the first to discover the Black Armada. The Black Armada had discovered them first. President Walsh straightened in her chair, her voice taking on the tone that had carried her through 3 global crises. Gentlemen, ladies, we have 72 hours to determine humanity's response. I want options. I want analysis. And I want to know if we have any advantages they might have overlooked. Ma'am, Admiral Reyes interjected. With all due respect, what if our only option is surrender? If they've conquered 600 species, then 600 species weren't human, President Walsh replied coldly. Admiral Chen, I'm ordering a full system analysis. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology we have. If we're going to fight, I want to know exactly what cards we're holding. Sarah nodded, but privately she wondered what cards could possibly matter against such overwhelming odds. The aliens had spoken of 600 conquered species. How many of those had thought they could resist? How many had discovered, too late, that courage meant nothing against superior technology? Over the next 18 hours, reports flooded in from across human space. The Black Armada ships remained perfectly still, like monuments to inevitable conquest. They responded to no communications, made no aggressive moves, showed no weaknesses. They simply waited, their presence a constant reminder of the ultimatum counting down. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, humanity's leading xenoarchaeologist, provided the most disturbing revelation during the Emergency Science Council meeting. She'd been analyzing fragments of alien technology recovered from crashed ships over the past decade, pieces that everyone had assumed came from different species exploring human space. They're all from the same source, she reported, her face pale on the view screen. The metallurgy, the energy signatures, the design philosophy. We've been finding wreckage from the Black Armada for years. Not scouts or explorers. Victims. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Victims. Ships that belong to other species. The Armada doesn't just conquer civilizations, Admiral. They assimilate their technology, their ships, their knowledge. Every species they've defeated has made them stronger. Those 600 conquered civilizations, their best technology is now part of the Armada's arsenal. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just facing one advanced civilization. They were facing the accumulated technological might of 600 different species, refined and integrated by conquerors who had perfected the art of galactic domination. Commander Roberts pulled up a new display on the tactical screen. Ma'am, I've been analyzing the formation patterns of the alien fleet. There's something odd about their positioning around Earth. Sarah studied the display, noting how the alien ships had arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the planet, maintaining precise distances and angles. What am I looking at, Commander? It's not a siege formation, ma'am. It's something else. The spacing, the energy readings from their ships. I think they're preparing to create some kind of field effect around the entire planet. Dr. Hayes leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. A containment field? But for what purpose? Before Roberts could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The tactical display lit up with new contacts, and Sarah's heart sank as she saw what was appearing on the sensors. More ships, dozens of them, emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. But these weren't the sleek obsidian vessels of the Black Armada. These ships were different, smaller, and moving fast. Moving toward Earth. Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Chun of the Solar Defense Fleet. Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. Identify yourselves immediately. The response came within seconds, and Sarah felt her world shift as she heard something she'd never expected. Hope. Admiral Chun, this is Captain Zara Okafor of the Free Coalition vessel Breakthrough. We've been running from the hegemony for 3 years, and we're here to warn you. Don't surrender. Don't trust them. And whatever you do, don't let them complete the harvesting protocol. Sarah stared at the display as the unknown ships moved into defensive positions between Earth and the Black Armada. Captain Okafor, what is the harvesting protocol? It's how they've conquered 600 species, Admiral. They don't just want your surrender. They want your people. Every human mind is going to be scanned, cataloged, and integrated into their collective consciousness. Your bodies will become biological components in their ships. Your memories will become their intelligence database. Surrender to the hegemony, and humanity doesn't just lose its freedom. It ceases to exist as a species. The bridge fell silent as the full horror of their situation became clear. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing her own realization reflected in their faces. This wasn't a war for territory or resources. This was a war for the very survival of human consciousness itself. "Captain Okafor," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I think we need to talk." As the unknown ships settled into formation alongside the human fleet, Sarah allowed herself a moment of something that felt almost like hope. Humanity wasn't alone in this fight. Somewhere out there, other species had managed to resist the Black Armada. Other civilizations had refused to kneel. The question now was whether the combined strength of the resistance would be enough to face down an enemy that had spent centuries perfecting the art of galactic conquest. Sarah looked at the countdown timer on her display. 68 hours remaining. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when the hegemony of eternal night encountered a species that had never learned how to surrender. Captain Zura Okafor materialized on the bridge of the UES Defiance in a shimmer of blue light, her alien transportation technology leaving Admiral Chen's crew staring in amazement. Zara was humanoid, but clearly not human, with silver-blue skin and for arms that moved with practiced efficiency. Behind her appeared two other beings, equally alien, but carrying themselves with the bearing of seasoned military officers. "Admiral Chen," Zara said, her voice carrying a slight electronic resonance. "Allow me to present Commander Thex of the Crystalline Reaches and General Karath of the Iron Clans. We represent what remains of the Free Coalition, the last organized resistance to the hegemony." Admiral Chun studied the aliens, noting the battle scars on their equipment and the weariness in their eyes. These were survivors, veterans of a war that had clearly been going badly for them. "Captain Okafor, your warning about the harvesting protocol. How many species have you seen?" "Consumed," Zara finished grimly. 43. In the 3 years since our homeworld fell. The hegemony doesn't just conquer, Admiral. They perfect the process. Each species they absorb teaches them new methods of subjugation, new technologies of control. By the time they reached our systems, they had learned to break a civilization's will to resist before the first shot was fired. Commander Thex stepped forward, his crystalline features reflecting the bridge lights in prismatic patterns. "Your species intrigues them, Admiral. In our intelligence gathering, we've learned that humans are the first species they've encountered that has no hereditary caste system, no genetic predisposition toward submission. The hegemony usually identifies and corrupts a species' natural rulers. But humans seem to produce leaders from any level of society." General Karath, a massive being covered in what looked like organic metal plating, added his voice to the discussion. "This confuses them, makes them uncertain. For the first time in centuries, they've offered a surrender ultimatum instead of simply beginning the harvesting immediately. They want to study you first." Admiral Chun felt a chill of understanding. "We're an experiment to them. A puzzle," Zara confirmed. "Which gives us an opportunity they haven't faced before. The Free Coalition has a plan, Admiral, but it requires something the hegemony has never encountered in their conquest of 600 species. It requires a species willing to sacrifice everything, not for victory, but to ensure that future species have a chance to resist." On the main display, the countdown timer showed 57 hours remaining. Admiral Chun could see her crew listening intently, and she knew that whatever decision she made in the next few minutes would determine the fate of not just humanity, but every free species in the galaxy. "What kind of sacrifice are we talking about?" Admiral Chun asked. Thex activated a holographic projector that filled the bridge with a three-dimensional map of local space. The hegemony's power comes from their ability to coordinate across vast distances instantaneously. They use quantum-entangled communication nodes, devices they've perfected over millennia of conquest. Every ship in their armadas is connected through this network. Karath pointed to specific locations on the map. "We've identified the primary node ship in each fleet. Destroy those, and their coordination breaks down. Individual ships become vulnerable, their collective intelligence fragments." "But," Zara continued, her voice heavy with implication, "the nodes are protected by technology we don't fully understand. The only way to destroy them is to overload them from within." It requires someone to get close enough to interface directly with their quantum matrix. Admiral Chen studied the map, seeing the tactical implications immediately. A suicide mission. More than that, Thex said quietly. The quantum feedback from destroying a node will create a cascade effect across their network. It won't just destroy the node ship. It will send a shockwave through the entire hegemony communication grid, potentially disrupting their operations across multiple star systems. The cost, Karath added, will be severe. Any ship close enough to the node when it's destroyed will be caught in the quantum cascade, and the feedback will be traceable back through their network to its source. The hegemony will know exactly where the attack originated. Admiral Chun felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders like a physical force. She was being asked to order the death of her crews, to potentially sacrifice entire worlds, for a chance to damage an enemy that had proven unstoppable for centuries. There's more, Zara said, activating another section of the holographic display. Our intelligence suggests that the hegemony has never faced coordinated resistance across multiple star systems simultaneously. If we can convince other species to strike at their node ships at the same time. A galaxy-wide uprising, Admiral Chun whispered, understanding the full scope of what was being proposed. Thex nodded. The Free Coalition has maintained secret communication with resistance cells on 17 worlds. Species that have been conquered but not fully absorbed, populations that still retain some level of independence. If they see humanity striking the first blow, if they witness the hegemony's apparent invincibility being challenged, it could inspire others to act, Karath finished. But only if humanity proves that resistance is possible. Only if you show the galaxy that the hegemony can bleed. Admiral Chun turned to her communications officer. Martinez, get me secure channels to every human colony, every ship commander, every military installation we can reach. And patch in President Walsh. As her crew worked to establish the connections, Admiral Chun found herself thinking about the nature of sacrifice. Humanity had always been willing to fight for their survival, but this was different. This was about fighting for the survival of species they'd never met, on worlds they'd never seen. President Walsh appeared on the main screen, her face showing the strain of the past day. Admiral, I've been briefed on our visitors. What's your assessment? Madam President, we're being offered a chance to strike a blow against an enemy that has never been successfully resisted. The cost will be enormous. We're talking about sacrificing ships, crews, potentially entire colonies. But if we don't act, if we surrender or simply try to defend ourselves, humanity will cease to exist as a species within months. The weight of those words settled over the bridge. Admiral Chun could see her crew processing the reality of their situation. They weren't just fighting for Earth or for the human colonies. They were fighting for the right of conscious beings to remain conscious. Over the next 6 hours, as the countdown timer ticked away, reports came in from across human space. The response from the colonies was unanimous and, Admiral Chun realized, uniquely human. Every commander, every planetary governor, every civilian leader reached the same conclusion independently. We fight, came the response from Alpha Centauri. Count us in, reported the Mars Defense Grid. Give us our targets, transmitted the Titan base. Even the civilian freighter captains and asteroid miners volunteered their ships for the mission. Admiral Chun watched the tactical displays fill with volunteers and felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood. Pride in her species. Zara observed the human response with something approaching amazement. In 3 years of building the resistance, we've never seen anything like this. Most species require extensive persuasion, detailed analysis of odds and outcomes. Humans seem to have made their decision based purely on principle. It's called stubbornness, Admiral Chun replied with a grim smile. We've never been very good at accepting the impossible. The plan that emerged over the following hours was ambitious beyond anything the Free Coalition had previously attempted. Human ships would target node vessels in 17 different star systems simultaneously. The Free Coalition would coordinate with their resistance cells to ensure maximum impact. And, if the plan succeeded, it would send a message across the galaxy that the hegemony of eternal night was not invincible. Dr. Hayes worked frantically with Thex to modify human quantum communication systems to interface with hegemony technology. The theoretical basis is sound, she reported during one of the planning sessions. But we've never attempted to overload a quantum matrix at this scale. The feedback could destroy our ships before we complete the mission. Then, we make sure we complete it quickly, Admiral Chen replied. As the countdown timer reached 36 hours, the hegemony ships began to move. The perfect spherical formations around each human world started to shift, reorganizing into what the coalition recognized as a harvesting configuration. They're preparing to begin early, Karath observed, studying the sensor readings. Something has made them impatient. Zara's expression darkened. They've detected our ships. They know the Free Coalition is here. That changes everything. Admiral Chun felt the timeline compressing around them. How long before they can begin the harvesting? 12 hours, Thex calculated. Maybe less. The Admiral looked around her bridge, seeing the faces of her crew, the representatives of 3 alien species who had placed their hopes in humanity. The tactical displays showing the greatest armada in galactic history preparing to erase her species from existence. She thought about the 17 resistance cells waiting for humanity's signal, about the billions of humans across dozens of worlds, about the choice between certain death and the possibility of meaningful sacrifice. All ships, Admiral Chun announced across the fleet communication network. Operation Defiance begins in 6 hours. Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for everyone who comes after us. As the human and coalition fleets began their final preparations, Admiral Chun watched the countdown timer and realized that time had become irrelevant. In 6 hours, the galaxy would discover whether courage could overcome overwhelming force, whether sacrifice could triumph over certainty, whether a species that had never learned to kneel could teach the universe how to stand. The Black Armada hung in space like judgment itself, but for the first time in their history of conquest, they were about to face an enemy that considered defeat preferable to surrender. The real battle was about to begin. Admiral Sarah Chin stood in the shuttle bay of the UES Defiance, watching as her assault teams made final preparations for what everyone knew was a one-way mission. The modified shuttles hummed with energy signatures that Dr. Hayes assured her would allow them to penetrate hegemony shields, but only once, and only at extremely close range. Quantum Matrix interface is stable, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, the lead engineer who had volunteered to personally handle the interface with the hegemony node ship. But, Admiral, once we initiate contact with their network, we'll have maybe 90 seconds before their security protocols adapt to our intrusion. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. 90 seconds to overload a quantum communication matrix that had been perfected over centuries of galactic conquest. 90 seconds to strike a blow that might inspire resistance across 17 star systems. Ma'am, Communications Officer Martinez called from the bridge comm. We're receiving coordination signals from all human colonies. Every target system reports ready. The Free Coalition resistance cells confirm they're standing by. Through the shuttle bay's observation windows, Admiral Chun could see the massive hegemony node ship hanging in space like a black cathedral. It was easily 20 times the size of Earth's largest dreadnought, its hull seeming to drink in the light from nearby stars. Sensors indicated that it contained not just the quantum communication matrix, but the preserved consciousness of thousands of conquered beings serving as biological processing units. Final systems check, Admiral Chun announced across the strike force frequency. Remember, the moment we begin our approach, every hegemony ship in the system will converge on our position. We need to punch through their defenses, interface with the quantum matrix, and initiate cascade overload before they can stop us. Captain Zara Okafor's voice came through from the coalition ship Breakthrough. Admiral, our sensor readings indicate the hegemony is preparing to activate something massive. Energy signatures unlike anything we've seen before. Admiral Chun felt ice in her veins. What kind of energy signatures? Planetary scale, Zara replied. They're not just preparing to harvest human consciousness. They're preparing to harvest the life force of entire worlds simultaneously. If they succeed, the energy collected will power their expansion across the galaxy at an unprecedented rate. The implications were staggering. The hegemony wasn't just planning to conquer humanity. They were planning to use humanity's life force to fuel the conquest of every remaining free species in the galaxy. All stations, this is Admiral Chun, she announced across all frequencies. Operation Defiance is now a full priority. We're not just fighting for our survival anymore. We're fighting for every living being in the galaxy. She climbed into the lead shuttle, taking the pilot's position personally. Around her, the assault team strapped in, their faces showing the calm determination of people who had accepted their fate. Lieutenant Commander Park activated the quantum interface device, a jury-rigged piece of technology that represented humanity's desperate attempt to turn the hegemony's own weapons against them. All shuttles, launch in formation, Admiral Chun ordered. The strike force erupted from the shuttle bays of 17 human ships simultaneously, their modified engines leaving trails of energy that the hegemony sensors immediately detected. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. Thousands of Obsidian fighters poured from the alien capital ships, their weapons systems charging with deadly efficiency. Contact in 30 seconds, Admiral Chun announced as she pushed her shuttle to maximum velocity. Remember, we only need one interface to succeed. One cascade overload to prove that the hegemony can be hurt. The space around them erupted in weapons fire. Hegemony energy beams, precise enough to cut molecules, filled the vacuum with deadly light. Human point defense systems worked frantically to clear a path, but the enemy's numerical superiority was crushing. Admiral Chun watched 3 of her shuttles disappear in flashes of superheated plasma. Their crews vaporized before they could even cry out. Then 5 more. Then 8. But the surviving shuttles pressed forward, their pilots flying with the desperate skill of people who knew that failure meant the end of everything they had ever loved. Interface range in 10 seconds, Park announced, her hands dancing over the quantum matrix controls. I'm reading massive energy buildup in the node ship. They're trying to implement some kind of defensive protocol. Through the shuttle's canopy, Admiral Chun could see the node ship's hull rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. The hegemony was adapting to their attack in real time, but they were also revealing something they had never shown before: desperation. Now, Admiral Chun shouted as she brought the shuttle into direct contact with the node ship's hull. Lieutenant Commander Park activated the quantum interface, and the shuttle's cabin filled with an alien presence that felt like ice and darkness. Through the interface, Admiral Chun could sense the vast network of conquered minds that powered the hegemony's communication system. Thousands of species, millions of individual consciousness, all trapped in digital slavery. But she could also sense something else: fear. For the first time in their history of conquest, the hegemony was afraid, not of death or defeat, but of the possibility that their victims might remember how to fight back. Interface established, Park announced, her voice strained as she fought to maintain contact with the alien system. Beginning cascade overload sequence. The shuttle shuddered as hegemony defensive systems tried to sever their connection. Through the quantum link, Admiral Chun could feel the node ship's artificial intelligence trying to understand what the humans were doing. It had protocols for dealing with conventional weapons, energy attacks, even nuclear detonations. But it had no protocol for dealing with someone who chose to sacrifice themselves not for victory, but to send a message. Cascade initiated, Park reported. Energy feedback building. Admiral, we need to maintain contact for 60 more seconds. Outside the shuttle, Admiral Chun could see the remaining human ships engaging the hegemony fleet in desperate combat. The UES Defiance was trading fire with ships 10 times its size, its crew fighting with the knowledge that every second they bought brought the galaxy closer to freedom. Admiral, Martinez's voice crackled through the comm system. We're receiving reports from other star systems. The assault teams at Alpha Centauri have achieved interface. Same at Wolf 359. Tau Ceti reports successful cascade initiation. A fierce joy filled Admiral Chun as she realized what was happening. Across 17 star systems, human crews were achieving the impossible. They were making the hegemony bleed. 30 seconds to complete cascade, Park announced, but her voice was fading. The quantum interface was burning out her neural pathways, the alien technology proving toxic to human consciousness. Admiral, I can feel them. The conquered minds. They're awakening. Through the interface, Admiral Chun sensed what Park meant. The trapped consciousness within the hegemony network were responding to humanity's sacrifice. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were remembering their names, their worlds, their reasons to fight. Cascade overload in 10 seconds. Park whispered, her hands still moving over the controls even as blood ran from her eyes and nose. For humanity. For everyone. The quantum matrix exploded. Admiral Chun felt the cascade effect tear through her consciousness like a wave of pure energy. The shuttle disintegrated around them, but she was no longer aware of her physical body. She was part of the quantum network, experiencing the moment of the hegemony's first defeat from the perspective of their own communication system. Across the galaxy, node ships erupted in cascading explosions as the overload effect spread through their quantum network. In 17 star systems, hegemony fleets found themselves suddenly blind and voiceless, their perfect coordination shattered by the sacrifice of creatures they had considered primitive. But, more than that, something was awakening in the depths of their conquered territories. Species that had been enslaved for generations were rising up as resistance cells struck at hegemony installations. The signal was spreading faster than light through quantum communication networks the invaders themselves had built. The message was simple and devastating to an empire built on the certainty of submission. Resistance was possible. On Earth, Captain Martinez took command of the Defiance as the hegemony fleet fell into chaos around them. Without their coordination network, the individual alien ships revealed a critical weakness. They had become dependent on their collective intelligence. Alone, they were vulnerable. All ships, this is Acting Admiral Martinez, he broadcast across the human fleet. Press the attack. Make them remember that humans don't surrender. The battle that followed would be remembered as the turning point, the moment when the greatest empire in galactic history learned that there were some species that would rather die than kneel. The Black Armada, scattered and confused by the loss of their node ships, found themselves facing an enemy that fought harder when the odds were worst. Captain Zura Okafor watched from the bridge of the breakthrough as human ships, many damaged beyond any hope of survival, continued to engage hegemony vessels twice their size. "I've never seen anything like this," she told her crew. "They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to prove that it can be done." Across the galaxy, the effect was immediate and dramatic. On conquered worlds, populations that had been passive for decades suddenly rose in rebellion. Hegemony garrison forces, cut off from central command, found themselves facing enemies they had never learned to fight, people who had nothing left to lose. The Free Coalition, monitoring quantum communication networks throughout local space, recorded the moment when everything changed. A transmission, originating from deep in hegemony space, broadcast on all frequencies in the language of the conquerors themselves. "This is the liberated world of Nethys Prime. The hegemony of eternal night is broken. The humans have shown us the way. Rise up, and remember your names." Within 72 hours, rebellions had erupted on over 300 conquered worlds. The hegemony, faced with the first coordinated resistance in their history, found their forces stretched beyond their ability to maintain control. Emperor Vorthak, supreme ruler of the hegemony, stood in his throne room watching reports of defeats that should have been impossible. For 600 conquests, for nearly a millennium of expansion, his empire had grown stronger with each victory. Every conquered species had added to their power, their knowledge, their certainty of superiority. But the humans had done something unprecedented. They had chosen to sacrifice themselves not for victory, but to inspire others. They had turned the hegemony's own strength against them by proving that their dominion was not absolute. "My emperor," his tactical advisor reported, "our analysts estimate that we are facing active rebellion on 40% of our conquered territories. Our forces are inadequate to suppress resistance on this scale." Emperor Vorthak considered his options. He could order the complete destruction of rebel worlds, but that would eliminate the resources he needed for expansion. He could negotiate, but the hegemony had never negotiated with inferiors. Or he could adapt to a new reality where conquest was no longer inevitable. "Send a message to the human homeworld," he finally commanded. "Offer them terms." The message that reached Earth a week later was unlike anything in the history of galactic conquest. The hegemony of eternal night, undefeated for 1,000 years, was requesting a ceasefire. Acting Admiral Martinez, now wearing the stars of full admiral and standing in the rebuilt bridge of the UES Defiance, read the alien message with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Admiral Chun and thousands of other heroes had given their lives to prove that resistance was possible. But they had done more than that. They had set the galaxy on fire with hope. Signal the hegemony, Admiral Martinez ordered. Tell them we'll consider their terms under one condition. Every conquered species goes free. Every enslaved consciousness is released. Every world is given the right to choose its own destiny. And if they refuse? His communications officer asked. Admiral Martinez looked at the tactical display showing human fleets throughout known space, reinforced now by ships from a dozen species that had broken free from hegemony control. He thought about Admiral Chen's sacrifice, about Lieutenant Commander Park's courage, about the billions of humans who had chosen to fight rather than surrender. Then, we keep fighting, he replied. Because that's what humans do. We fight until everyone is free. The rising Black Armada had demanded Earth's surrender and had indeed set the galaxy on fire. But the flames that spread through space carried freedom, not conquest, hope instead of despair. And, for the first time in galactic history, an empire built on submission discovered what happened when they encountered a species that had never learned how to kneel. The age of the hegemony was ending. The age of the free galaxy had begun.